All right, welcome to the cell cycle. All right, so the cell cycle really is referring to the division of the cell and really the life cycle of the cell. This down here, this video shows a cell, really, it's a zygote starting to undergo development. Now, cell division is used for that purpose to some degree. So you can see the one cell is dividing into two cells, and then each of those two cells are going to divide into another two cells. And this is going to continue to happen. And for multicellular organisms, obviously, it's going to start to develop into this structure right here, which is called a blastula. And then the cells are going to start to migrate, and then they start to differentiate into different tissue types. Okay, so I'm not going to get too much into detail about that. Let's just talk about the main roles of cell division in general. Now, the ability of cells to undergo cell division kind of is one of those things that distinguishes those things that are living and those things that are non-living. So it's one of the key characteristics of living things is to be able to reproduce. So basically life is based on cell division in general. Now there's three key talked about one of them. Now, cell division is, in general, an asexual process. However, there are sexual types of cell division, which will be the subject of the next chapter. But we're going to be talking about the asexual process for this particular chapter. Now, unicellular organisms like this organism right here, which is an amoeba, it's a protist, but it still undergoes only asexual reproduction. And it's done by fission. So it's a relatively simple process. So it's really not as complicated as the cell division that occurs in plant cells and animal cells, which we're going to discuss a little bit more in detail in the next segment. Okay, so asexual reproduction is one key purpose of cell division. Another key purpose of cell division would be growth and development. So you saw an example of, the beginning stages of development of a multicellular organism. So, of course, the organism grows and develops, right? So the cells start to multiply, and then the cells start to differentiate into different tissues so that we can have our heart tissue and our skin tissue and our immune system, right? Now, the would be tissue renewal, right? So if you get injured, what happens? There's signals that indicate that those cells that are surrounding that injury need to start undergoing cell division so that the injured cells, which are dying or gone, can be replaced with new cells. Now, this takes a bit of time for eukaryotic cells. So we're going to discuss a lot of the details in the second segment. However, this will just be kind of an overview. Now, most cell division is going to result in daughter cells, which are genetically identical. And this is the case for mitosis or any asexual process. So this is kind of how it's represented. So with asexual processes, basically one cell is the parent cell. That one divides into two cells, which are the daughter cells. They're all genetically identical, which is depicted by the same color here. Now, there is some exceptions, right? So there's some processes that result in a daughter cell, which is not identical to the parent cells. Now, one example that we'll be discussing in this particular semester is meiosis. Meiosis is a special type of cell division, which its purpose is to produce gametes. And the gametes are, example, sperm and egg, are not going to be identical to the parent cell. So asexual processes basically start out with two parents, which are genetically distinct, or they should be. And then basically they reproduce, they mate and then produce a daughter cell ultimately that will be genetically different. So you can kind of think of it as these, this, let's say, father has sperm that have maybe just different combinations of his genes in each sperm, which are all different. And then the mother has different combinations of genes in her eggs. Well, when the sperm and the egg fuse, it's going to be combinations of both. So the daughter cell, which is going to be, start out as a zygote, it'll be a single cell at some point, and then it'll start to undergo cell division. And each of the cells will be genetically the same. However, this whole organism is going to be different from the parents. Now we're going to talk about the organization of the genetic material. So here we can see a cell. This is an animal cell. It's kind of spherical and irregular shaped, and you can see the chromosomes kind of highlighted. Now, this isn't really how the cell looks like during most of the time, but here the purpose is to highlight these chromosomes. Now, the genome is basically the DNA of the cell, right? So all the DNA of the cell. Now, some cells have only one molecule of DNA. Other cells have multiple molecules of DNA. Now, the DNA are packaged up into chromosomes, and really what chromosomes are, just basically DNA kind of wrapped around these proteins called histones. Now, this doesn't occur in all types of organisms. For instance, many prokaryotes, especially the bacteria domain, they do not have the histones. However, the archaea do have the histones, which the DNA wraps around. Now, the DNA plus the proteins is called the chromatin. The chromatin. So remember, the DNA is going to be located inside the nucleus, and you can kind of see this nucleus, which is formed. This is not, again, the way the chromosomes are shown the majority of the time of the cell. This is when they're starting to condense. When they start to get condensed, they're starting to get wrapped around those proteins and condense into what would be called. Now, every eukaryotic species has a specific number of chromosomes in the nucleus. For instance, all of our cells have 46 chromosomes, except for our gametes. Now, there's two types of cells. There's somatic cells and there's gametes. The somatic cells are the cells that are the non-reproductive cells. They're diploid, and what that means is there's two copies of each chromosome. So basically, in your skin cells, in your heart cells, in your muscle cells, there are two copies of each chromosome. So there's 23 chromosomes that are paired up. So there's two copies of each one. So that makes 46 chromosomes. The gametes have half as much. Okay, so those are the reproductive cells. So like I showed you, during meiosis, basically meiosis is the production of the sperm and the eggs, but during reproduction or sexual reproduction, the sperm and the egg fuse together and they create a combination of the sperm and egg. Now let's look at the chromosome in general. So this here shows a typical mitotic chromosome, and a mitotic chromosome might not be what you would think is what a chromosome is. Now the term chromosome and chromatin and all these C words are going to be a little bit going to get a little bit confusing. So it would be useful for you to make note cards to try to remember what each of them actually mean. Now, the cell, like I said, in the cell, the chromosomes are going to condense. And basically, this occurs when cell division, when the cell's starting to prepare for cell division. So the DNA is actually replicated first during S phase, and the chromosomes start to condense. And each chromosome that's been replicated are going to like stick together. So here, this shows right here two chromosomes stuck together, but it's really called a mitotic chromosome. A mitotic chromosome consists of two sister chromatids. Okay, so they're sister because this one has been duplicated and it's genetically the same. And these sister chromatids are connected at the centromere. Okay, so at the center, about the center of the chromosome, they're connected. Okay, so this whole thing represents a mitotic chromosome. This will make more sense once we go through the stages of mitosis. Now, during cell division, the sister chromatids are going to separate and move to two separate nuclei. So that's how basically the DNA is replicated and then they match up and then they separate again. So this kind of shows here the chromosomes are in blue, and then we have part of the cytoskeleton in red, and these are the microtubules that are connecting to the centromere region. So they connect at that centromere region. And you can see that's kind of highlighted by the combination of the blue and the red. It looks like green right there. Okay, so once the chromatids are separated, they're now called individual chromosomes. So the mitotic chromosome is basically the two sister chromatids connected together. Each of those chromosomes are called chromatids when they're connected. However, when they separate, they're called individual chromosomes. Now let's look at the overview of mitosis. So here we have a cell, and we're kind of going to make it simple. We have one chromosome in the cell. That makes it a lot easier to deal with at that point. So this cell is going to undergo mitosis. So what happens? First, the DNA is replicated. Okay, so the DNA is replicated, so now we have two copies of this chromosome, this single chromosome, but then they're going to be connected. Okay, and this is what the mitotic chromosome is. It's actually two chromosomes connected together, but they're not called chromosomes when they're connected together like this. They're called sister chromatids. Okay, so I know it's getting a little bit confusing at this point, but I think the more you look at it and the more you practice, it's good to draw it, and the better it'll be for you to remember all of this stuff. Okay, so now this is in preparation for mitosis, and then after mitosis has occurred, now you have two identical cells with one chromosome in them. So here we've got one chromosome. This is still one chromosome, but it's actually two sister chromatids, really one chromosome copied. And then the cell separates, and then we have the individual chromosomes that are identical to the parent. So this is the parent cell. These are the daughter cells right here. Okay, so that's an overview of mitosis. Now there's a lot of things going on in between here that we're going to be talking about in the next segment. Now, I told you the three key roles of cell division. One of them is for asexual reproduction. Another one is for growth and development. And the third one is for tissue renewal. And then I talked in terms of, kind of distinguish between chromosomes and chromatin, and also chromatids, sister chromatids. All right, so get ready. We're going to talk about the details of mitosis and the cell cycle in general.